It was a warm summer day in Cleveland, Ohio, when a neighbor noticed something odd. A child's cries had echoed from a quiet home, again and again, but no one ever answered. Days passed, the cries stopped. Silence fell, and when police finally entered that house, what they found was the stuff of nightmares. This is the disturbing story of a 16-month-old girl named Jylin, a baby left alone for 10 days, while her mother went on vacation. This is the case of Crystal Candelario and the unbearable truth of what happened inside that house. Crystal Candelario was 32 years old, a single mom living in the West Boulevard neighborhood of Cleveland. Neighbors said she seemed quiet, reserved, but no one knew what was going on behind closed doors. Her daughter Jalen was just a toddler, 16 months old, described as joyful, bright-eyed, playful. But on June 6th, 2023, everything changed. Crystal packed her bags, locked her home, and left. She told no one. She didn't call a babysitter. She didn't ask a friend to check in. She simply left. And baby Jylin? She was left behind, alone. Crystal Candelario boarded a plane. Her first stop was Detroit, then Puerto Rico, while her daughter lay trapped inside a playpen with only a few bottles of milk. Crystal was soaking up the sun, posting smiling selfies from the beach. One of her captions read, "The time that is enjoyed is the true time lived." Meanwhile, back in Cleveland, a neighbor's doorbell camera recorded Jalynn's cries, especially heartbreaking around day 2. Screams that slowly faded into silence. For 10 days, no one checked on Jylinn. No one came to the door. The home remained shut tight. Inside that house, the air grew hotter. The milk ran out. And Jylinn, confined to a urine-soaked playpen, waited for her mother to return. She never had a chance. On June 16th, 10 days after she left, Crystal returned home. According to police, she found Jylinn unresponsive in the same playpen. The blankets were soiled, the bottom liner soaked with urine and feces. Crystal called 911, but before first responders arrived, she changed Jylinn into a clean outfit. Paramedics arrived to find a horrifying scene. Jylinn was already gone. Her lips were dry, her eyes sunken. There was fecal matter in her mouth and under her fingernails. She was emaciated, 7 pounds lighter than her previous checkup just 2 months before. There were no visible injuries, just the silent horror of starvation. The coroner ruled the cause of death: severe dehydration and malnutrition. At first, Crystal lied. She told investigators she had been with her daughter the entire time, but phone records, social media, and flight logs told a different story. Photos showed her smiling on beaches, dining out, partying, enjoying her true time lived. When finally confronted, Crystal broke down, but not in the way you might expect. Detectives noted a lack of emotion, a distant coldness. At one point, she even tried to blame Jylinn, claiming the toddler had refused to eat. It wasn't until the evidence became overwhelming that she confessed. In February 2024, Crystal Candelario stood before a judge. She pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and child endangerment. In court, she claimed she was mentally unwell. Her mother, Ketty Torres, begged the judge for mercy. She described Crystal's struggles with depression, anxiety, and fainting spells, said that stopping her medication had led to an emotional collapse. Crystal herself said, "I'm not trying to justify my actions, but no one knew how much I was suffering." She claimed she prayed daily for forgiveness from both God and Jylinn.
We're here on a very tragic case.
But Judge Brendan Sheehan wasn't moved. He looked Crystal in the eye and said, "You left your child trapped in a tiny prison while you were out having a good time. That little baby waited, hoping someone would come." He continued, "You could have saved her with one phone call. Instead, we see photos of you smiling on a beach while your daughter was eating her own feces just to survive." Crystal Candelario was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Sheehan concluded, just as you didn't let Jalen out of her confinement until she died, you too should spend the rest of your life in a cell. The only difference is, prison will at least feed you. At the sentencing, a Detective T.J. Powell read a poem he had written in Jalen's memory. His voice trembled as he recited, J is for the justice that will be received today. A is for the angel wings she earned on that dreadful day. I is for the incremental repetition of a death that clearly made no sense. L is for the lack of love while alone for 11 days. Y is for a young life that was taken away. N is for new eternal life Jalen gained on that day. It was a heartbreaking moment, one that brought the courtroom to tears. Jalen was only 16 months old. She couldn't speak, couldn't ask for help. She relied on her mother, the one person meant to protect her. But instead, she was left to die, alone. This case is a chilling reminder of how silent suffering can happen behind closed doors, and how innocence can be lost in the most unimaginable ways. A tragic death, a foster system under scrutiny, and a foster mother sentenced to prison after her 10-year-old foster son was found dead, following what she initially described as a tragic accident. But the evidence would soon tell a far darker story. Today, we take you to Northwest Indiana, where a young boy named Dakota Levi Stevens lost his life in the very home meant to protect him. His foster mother, Jennifer Lee Wilson, claimed it was all a misunderstanding. But the autopsy? It told a different story. This is the chilling case of a boy failed at every level, and the woman now serving time. Dakota Levi Stevens was just 10 years old, a quiet, resilient kid placed in the foster system, likely with the hope of finally finding stability. He had been placed in the care of Jennifer Lee Wilson, a 48-year-old foster mother living in Porter County, Indiana. But instead of safety, Dakota would soon find himself in what investigators now say was a deeply unsafe environment. According to neighbors and documents later revealed in court, Dakota had tried to ask for help, desperate to escape the place he was calling home. And yet, help never came in time. On a seemingly ordinary day in April 2024, things took a deadly turn inside Wilson's home. According to court documents, Wilson claimed that Dakota was trying to leave the house. In her own words, she didn't know whether she tackled him or if they both fell to the ground. Either way, what she admitted next shocked investigators. Wilson said she laid on top of Dakota's midsection for several minutes. She weighed over 340 pounds, according to her license records. Dakota? Just 91 pounds, barely 4 feet 10 inches tall. She claimed one hand was holding her phone, the other was bracing her body. When she finally got off him, she asked, "Are you faking?" Then she noticed his pale eyelids. That's when, she says, she began CPR and called 911. But what makes this story even more haunting is what happened before Dakota collapsed. A neighbor came forward telling authorities that just 30 minutes before emergency responders arrived, Dakota had run to her house. He begged her to adopt him. He said his foster parents had hit him in the face and wouldn't let him call his caseworker. The neighbor didn't see any visible injuries at the time, and tragically, she never called police or child services. Half an hour later, Dakota was unconscious. By the time help arrived, it was already too late. The Porter County Coroner's Office later released the results of Dakota's autopsy. The cause of death was clear: mechanical asphyxia. The manner of death: homicide. In layman's terms, he was suffocated, crushed. Wilson may have claimed it was accidental, but the physical evidence painted a much more brutal picture. For over 2 months, Jennifer Lee Wilson wasn't arrested, but then nearly 25 miles away from her home, her vehicle was flagged by a license plate reader camera. Police moved in. She was arrested and later charged with reckless homicide in the death of Dakota Levi Stevens. Not murder, not manslaughter. Reckless homicide. And that charge would be controversial, and especially when it came time for sentencing. In January 2025, Wilson appeared before a judge in Porter County after pleading guilty to reckless homicide. She was sentenced to 6 years in the Indiana Department of Correction. But here's the catch. 1 year was suspended. She'll serve only 5 years in prison, followed by 1 year of probation. To many, this sentence felt deeply inadequate for the loss of a 10-year-old child, a child who had run for help and been denied. This case raises uncomfortable questions about the foster care system. Why was someone weighing 340 pounds cleared to physically restrain a child without oversight? How did Dakota's cry for help get ignored not once, but twice? And why was this foster home still approved? Dakota was not just failed by Jennifer Wilson. He was failed by the system designed to protect him. Dakota Levi Stevens was a child with hope, a child who wanted safety, a chance at a better life. Instead, his life ended in silence, beneath the weight of someone meant to care for him. Jennifer Wilson may now be behind bars, but the scars left behind by this tragedy remain. May we never forget his name, and may his story be a call for reform, accountability, and justice for every child in foster care.
Do you feel what you did was wrong?
I know it's wrong.
What do you
But
think your
it's
punishment
wrong
should
in
be?
the eyes of God, okay?
In your eyes, I'm asking you, not in the eyes of God. In your eyes, do you feel like you did what you had to do?
I didn't have to do that. It was wrong. Look, I don't want to say yes, but my son told me I saved him.
The disturbing story of Mitchelle Blair, the Michigan mom who killed her kids and stuffed them in the freezer. There are some cases that are so disturbing, so unsettling, that they shake even the most hardened detectives. In March of 2015, eviction workers in Detroit made a horrifying discovery inside a seemingly ordinary apartment freezer. 2 frozen bodies. What they uncovered would expose one of the most shocking and brutal child abuse cases in American history. This is the story of Mitchelle Blair, a mother of 4 who took the lives of 2 of her own children and kept them in her freezer for years, while continuing to live in the same house with her surviving kids. A story of abuse, obsession, and unimaginable horror. Viewer discretion is advised. Mitchelle Blair was a 35-year-old single mother living on the east side of Detroit. She had 4 children, Stephen, Stoney, Gabby, and her youngest son, whose name hasn't been publicly released for privacy reasons. Blair was unemployed and struggling financially. Neighbors described her as quiet but reclusive. She often kept to herself and had recently pulled all of her children out of school, citing homeschooling. Behind closed doors, however, the environment inside her home was anything but nurturing. Relatives said she would ask for money. Others noticed the children weren't often seen. But no one could have guessed the extent of the horror unfolding inside that apartment. On March 24, 2015, a bailiff and eviction crew arrived at Blair's home on orders from the 36th District Court. She had fallen behind on rent. Blair wasn't home, so the crew began removing furniture. Everything seemed typical until they got to the white chest freezer in the living room. When the sheriff's deputy opened it, they found a horrifying sight. The frozen body of a teenage girl wrapped in a plastic bag. Underneath her was a second body. A boy wrapped in a blanket. The Detroit police were immediately called, and within hours the city and the country would be rocked by what was uncovered. Police quickly located Mitchelle Blair at a neighbor's apartment with her 2 surviving children, Gabby and her youngest son. When asked about her missing children, Stephen and Stoney, she didn't hesitate. Blair confessed almost immediately. She told officers, "I did it, I killed them." As she was being arrested, Blair said she wasn't evil. She was just protecting her youngest son. According to her, both Stephen and Stoney had sexually assaulted their younger brother, but there was no evidence to support this. Not from police investigations, not from medical exams, not from anyone else. It was a claim she would stick to right through her sentencing. Mitchell Blair's confession was deeply disturbing and showed no sign of remorse. In 2012, she claimed she discovered troubling behavior involving her youngest son and suspected that her 9-year-old son, Stephen, had harmed him. Blair confronted Stephen. After what she described as a confession, she began to punish him severely. Over the course of nearly 2 weeks, Blair subjected Stephen to extreme abuse that eventually led to his tragic death. She then wrapped his body in a blanket and placed him in a freezer. 9 months later, Blair said she believed her daughter Stoney, who was 13 at the time, had also harmed her youngest child. This time, Blair didn't hesitate. She again took matters into her own hands, leading to Stoney's death as well. Her body was wrapped and placed in the same freezer, on top of Stephen's. After that, life in the household appeared to continue as if nothing had happened. For nearly 3 years, Mitchell Blair continued to live in the apartment with her 2 remaining children. She kept the freezer in the living room and told anyone who asked that Stephen and Stoney were away, being homeschooled elsewhere, or staying with relatives. But her daughter Gabby later revealed the terrifying truth. "I was afraid to even walk past the freezer," she said. "There was nowhere else to hide the bodies, so she kept them in there like meat." Gabby and her brother lived in constant fear. Blair continued to beat them. Gabby said she was burned with curling irons, beaten with planks, and always worried she'd be next. But no one, not neighbors, not CPS, not family, intervened. In June of 2015, Mitchell Blair stood before the Wayne County Circuit Court and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. She told the judge, "I don't feel no remorse for the death of them demons. I would kill them again." Prosecutors and child welfare officials said there was zero evidence that Stephen or Stoney had ever abused their younger brother. Blair's own daughter, Gabby, later said their younger brother only made those claims after intense pressure from their mother. "She was obsessed with the idea. He just said what she wanted to hear," Gabby said in a 2023 interview. The court terminated her parental rights, and Blair was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She now resides in the Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Ypsilanti, Michigan. After Blair's arrest, Gabby and her younger brother went to live with relatives. They were enrolled back in school and began receiving therapy. Gabby has spoken publicly about her mother's abusive, terrifying behavior and how she survived what many call a house of horrors. "I watched everything I said. I knew one wrong move, and I could be next in that freezer," she said. Their story stands as a tragic reminder of the failures in the system, of missed warning signs, unchecked mental illness, and children who slipped through the cracks. But it's also a story of survival. Gabby made it out alive, and now she's sharing her truth. The case of Mitchell Blair is one of the most harrowing in modern true crime history. 2 children brutally murdered by the one person who should have protected them the most, their mother. If you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, speak up. Which of these 3 cases shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments. I read them all. If you appreciate deep dives into true crime, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next twisted case. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and stay watching.